Okay, thanks very much, Amir. Appreciate that. Hi there. So I'm going to apologise for name pronunciation here. Prabhu from Stantec, maybe you go next. You're on mute, just so you know.
Sorry, thank
No
you.
problem.
Hi, I'm Prabhu with Stantec. I lead the digital transformation smart utility practice for Stantec North America. Digital twin and is a core component or topic of discussion every time we have a conversation with our clients in terms of digital transformation. So I'm really excited to be part of this session.
Great, thanks, Prabhu. Picho, is that how you pronounce your name? Sorry. Hello, are you there, Picho? Maybe not. We'll crack on. I guess I'll introduce myself to round up. So my name is Wlliam Jeal. I work for Veolia Water Technologies in the UK. So I kind of have two roles really, or two parts to my role. I head up our Municipal Services activity for the UK, but also I head up our digital activities for the UK and Ireland as well. So I know Northumbrian very well, for example, Andrew. We've done some work together in the past. I guess I'll kind of just share some thoughts with you to set the scene for this session. When SWAN and Gigi asked me to sort of chair one of these breakout sessions, I was kind of racking my brain to think actually what's a bit of a different topic that we could kind of cover. You know, always with these kind of sessions, you know, in these conferences, you get lots and lots of really interesting technical discussion, and you know, I've been really interested in the presentation so far. But what I was trying to think of is actually, you know, look, the technical development of digital twin is kind of one aspect here. What we need to consider is the environment in which we're trying to deliver that innovation, and one of those aspects is the sort of commercial models, you know, and how do we drive innovation through existing, sometimes quite well established, long established over decades, sometimes commercial models. And I thought it would be quite interesting to throw some ideas around amongst the group today, to see, you know, what our thoughts are collectively. And it's great that, you know, across the group here we've got some sort of traditional asset owners, some people representing more EPC, a consultant role, and also, I suppose, from my perspective, a technology provider. And I think it'd be quite interesting to see if we can have a discussion around the commercial models from those different perspectives. What I thought I'd do is just share some sort of ideas with you, so to sort of set the scene a little bit to hopefully stimulate the discussion. I thought I'd share with you, I don't know whether anybody heard of a guy called Jay Doblin. He was an American industrial designer. And he came up with this kind of concept that hopefully you can see on the screen now, this sort of periodic table of innovation. And I thought that might be quite a good place to kind of start. So what this tool does is to consider a range of key areas when you're innovating. You know, rather than just considering of innovation being a technical activity, developing a new product, a new thing, actually look at that innovation cycle in a much wider context. You know, so ranging from, you know, the technical activity, but bringing that wider. So considering, you know, right from the profit models, the business models, the network around innovation, right through to kind of customer engagement. And you know what Doblin was saying, and it's, you know, some quite interesting data around this, and I put a link to the website there actually, is you don't necessarily have to have all of these elements present to develop successful innovation. But actually, as a general rule, if you've got sort of 5 or 6 of these elements across those 3 kind of colours, across those 3 sections, then that's really where you see some of the most successful innovation. And to sort of take that a step further, I thought I'd look at, I've pulled together some sort of high-level summary information here, but look at where we tend to focus our efforts in terms of innovation across those 10 components. And I suppose rather unsurprisingly, you can see that there's a lot of innovation around these two central pieces here. So around that traditional innovation piece, around technical innovation, developing a new piece of equipment, a new technology, a new product, and very little innovation around the sort of configuration stage, so around those business models and around those networks. What's interesting, if I just flip to the next slide, hopefully this is catching up with you, is contrast the effort with actually where we see the value. And this is quite interesting stats here to say actually we spend a lot of effort looking at technical innovation, maybe at the expense of more commercial innovation. But where do we see, where do we get the most payback? And where do we see the most value? And actually then when you consider that, there's a lot of value to be derived from the configuration part of this periodic table, not just the technical part. So, always with innovation, and we've heard some of it today, particularly the last presentation from Anglian, in terms of, we need to focus our efforts where we're going to get the most value, and we need to deliver that value quickly. So it's slightly remiss of us really not to consider the whole innovation cycle when we're looking at a new technology. And just to take that a little bit of a step further, and looking at that configuration part of that periodic table, by focusing on these commercial models and the network, we can often find fresh ways to, for an organisation to convert kind of offerings, solutions, assets into greater value and revenue. And I think particularly in the when we consider actually the water industry, a lot of it is around kind of networks and what greater value can we drive from our networks. Looking at that supply chain, looking at alliances, how do we maximize the benefit from those relationships to build strategy partnerships rather than just a supply chain relationship, and how do you sort of capitalize on your own strengths, but also recognizing where there are some weaknesses there, and then engaging with the supply chain to look for potential partners to fill those gaps and looking where those capabilities are. And I was trying to think of a good example for this, and one of the best actually is to look at Uber. Okay, and I know it has absolutely nothing to do with the water industry; it's a completely different sector. But Uber's a really interesting example. Another one is Airbnb, actually. And if you look at the way Uber is structured, and Uber essentially revolves around technology. It is a technology business that happens to move people around. And technology is the kind of cornerstone of it. The technology that enables Uber to operate, their sort of tech stack, if you like, absolutely none of it is proprietary. Okay, so none of it is owned by Uber. None of it was developed by Uber. It's all kind of available with external capabilities. So, in theory, with the right kind of relationships and the right licenses in place, there's nothing stopping any of us developing an Uber Mark II tomorrow. But I think that's really interesting, in terms of Uber in their development has not tried to build complicated things and understand everything completely. What it's done is assessed actually who are the partners out there that can help support this. And I think that's a really interesting example when we look at the digital twin. And actually, we've started to see a little bit in the workshops already today, in terms of where those kind of skill sets are and collaboration between organisations, and that's fantastic from a technology perspective. But what I was thinking of is sometimes is there a challenge there with respect to the commercial models, and I've put a few kind of ideas on this slide really, and you know, unmute yourselves. I want this to be an open discussion. But you know, if you think about the water industry, and I see this both in the UK, but also I work with colleagues across Europe, Africa as well. You know, and the water industry, you know, going back to its sort of, you know, of old, if you like, is very much focused on delivering assets, strong kind of procurement methodologies, because actually historically a lot of it was around procuring new assets and delivering new assets, so very much a design and build sort of mentality. And that's absolutely fit for purpose in that context. But when we start to look at digital twin and even wider, you know, AI, embracing IoT, I think we can challenge to say, actually, are those kind of procurement models, commercial models, really kind of fit for purpose in that context? And I'm not for 1 minute saying I've got all the answers. Actually, what I'm interested in is having a discussion around this. You know, so I really, you know, that's kind of me talking over, if you like, and I kind of open it up to the floor in terms of, you know, what your ideas are and what your experiences are here in terms of whether you've tried to introduce digital twin or IoT concepts into the water industry, and what sort of blockers you've come up against from a commercial perspective. And what I'm interested in is views from all aspects of that ecosystem. So whether you're an asset owner, a water company, you're a supplier into the water company, or you're kind of a facilitator trying to bring good ideas together, you know, where are those challenges that you see? So, you know, over to you guys. I'm interested in what your thoughts are. Who wants to kick off, or are we going to have virtual tumbleweed? Andrew, maybe if I can come to you first from a sort of asset owner perspective, what are your thoughts?
I definitely see the problem. I definitely see it has been an issue, and certainly trying to get funding for a software project where you don't actually have a tangible outcome. The business cases stack up slightly differently to how you would for a traditional capital investment.
Yeah.
And often some of the problems we're looking at, you could do either.
Yeah.
You could either invest in new process streams, or you could try and optimize the ones you've got via a digital twin. And how to weigh those two up against each other, because one has an intrinsic capital value that we can fund quite easily. We've got methods in place for getting that kind of funding, and you know what you're going to get. Whereas funding for a digital twin may end up being a much cheaper project and may give the same outcome, but there's a risk there that you may not get the outcome you're hoping for.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we're certainly open to looking at new models for doing this, whether that's around how we can share risk reward with a partner to come in and work with us, or any other options, or even getting things as a service where you pay on a subscription basis rather than a big initial capital outlay.
Yeah.
If we're confident it's going to bring us OPEX efficiencies, then OPEX funding works really well for that. But a lot of that is quite early days.
Yeah.
There's not many suppliers there that are quite geared up for that, or certainly suppliers we traditionally deal with. I think they are starting to look at how they can change their offerings as well, because I think the demand will change a lot in the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I see that as well. I mean, you know, I was having a discussion with a UK utility a couple of weeks ago, and actually we had quite a long discussion around ideas, great, but who's actually going to pay for it? And that was very much around the kind of siloed budgets that we often see within water companies, in terms of, does it come out of an ops budget? Does it come out of a capital budget? As a team, who kind of owns it? Does it sit with the process team from a process performance perspective, or does it sit with the energy team from an OPEX reduction, you know, perspective? And I think, you know, I see those challenges as well. And I think as well, you know, it's incumbent on the supply chain to meet some of that challenge. I think it can be quite an unfair challenge actually for the supply chain to sort of levy at the asset owners, the water companies, to say, well, actually, the commercial culture doesn't exist. We don't, who has the budget? We're trying to talk to too many people. But actually, I think Andrew, you make an interesting point around, actually sharing some of that risk and sharing some of that commercial model. And does the supply chain need to be smarter, I guess, or more adaptable to understanding some of those budgetary challenges that an asset owner faces? So actually, if a digital twin or an IoT concept or piece of technology or system really delivers value to the operational team, but actually the operational budget isn't sufficient enough to fund the initial development, well, maybe there's a different commercial model that needs to be considered there. So I think that's really interesting insight, because a big part of this for me is actually supply chain integration. And I see kind of one of the challenges, and I'll be interested in other thoughts on this, is I think as an industry, because inherently we're engineers, we like to build things ourselves and we like to solve problems ourselves. So I think sometimes it can be a challenge to, to say, actually, well, I'm going to let somebody else in and challenge me a little bit with their ideas and their concepts, and actually somebody else or an organization might have better capability than we have. And I don't sort of blanket everybody with that, but I see a little bit of that as well. And actually, do we need to sort of integrate more closely and view the traditional supply chain as a series of partners to actually collaborate on together? And I think some of the presentations earlier were really interesting from that perspective. Thames Tideway particularly, where there's good collaboration across a sort of supply chain ecosystem there, and I think that's really interesting. Thanks, Andrew. Any other thoughts, Ryan, from yourself, maybe?
I don't have anything in particular. I mean, I do see that issue. We're trying now to find out how we're going to maybe co-fund some of this development, to just install a few digital twins in the US in particular, or actually all over. There's one in the US that I'm working on, and yeah, the challenge I'm coming up with is, I mean, we don't have a lot of case stories, so it's not, and it's a very customized offering. Yeah. So it's I've found it's pretty difficult to explain what it is, what a digital twin is, and what we're going to do that's different than our classical consulting type work. But we're working towards it. So I've found if I can find a particular problem and really zone in on that, and that's what one of the presentations was really, well, a few of them focused on it. Just you got to start small. Find something. Maybe it is in operations, or maybe it is energy based, and then that helps you. Maybe it's the opposite direction of what you're suggesting, but that helps you sort of pigeonhole the project to at least get something kicked off. And then at some point it does have to expand, and then we are going to have to. I agree. We do have to think differently and find a way to. I mean, if it's a global solution, a global for the organization or whoever it is that the end client is, then it's going to have to be funded differently, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's an interesting point about where you start. Because I think if you actually if you just compare some of the presentations earlier, some articulate really well the kind of big picture, and where we need to go, and then some were very, very specific and talking about specific ROI and specific output. And I have to say I've struggled with that a little bit myself sometimes, is when you sort of broach this kind of topic, whether it's digital twin, whether it's real-time control, whatever it may be, it can be a challenge actually to articulate what the real value is, and get that message across, and I think that can sometimes be a challenge. But I agree with you. I think a key way to start that collaboration, and maybe picking up on some of the points that Andrew was mentioning, really start to stimulate some of that discussion around commercial models, is to start small and demonstrate the value. And then actually that gives an organization the impetus, so to speak, to actually go and sit up and make a move on this. It's a bit difficult to try and talk about developing commercial models when we're still at that kind of conceptual stage, because what does it actually mean? You know, how do we drive it forward? Pedro, what about your perspective from Glenagua in Ireland?
Right. From my perspective, from an EPC company, I'm thinking of I'm delivering a service to, let's say, Irish Water or any other utility, and within the same region, let's say, I, as an EPC company, I can have in-house technology, or I can go and outsource technology for digital twins. Mm-hmm. And let's say from a utility point of view, I think one of the challenges and commercial challenges is to integrate solutions provided by different contractors and integrate them within their full system. So I provide my service with my technology, and a competitor provides their service with their technology. So I think it might have to be conceptualized on a higher level, where I don't know if from a software point of view, probably so. At least if there's a common language, let's say that a digital twin within an utility, if there's a common language, that then solutions or technical solutions are built in that. I think that might stimulate the market, both from a technology point of view and also from a procurement point of view. Because I think the next stage of procurement, the way procurement will look like on the future, and speaking from an EPC perspective, of course, is procurement will go digital, and we will go to look for digital solutions, as we will have to go and look for, as nowadays we go and look for a sensor or look for a pump. So, but I think that has come from the top of the chain. So, and because at the end of the day, what matters to EPC companies is profit. So, if we can deliver a profitable solution, it's going back to the same point that we need to start on small things and show that they are profitable on the smaller scale, and then upscale that. But it needs to start. I think it needs to start on a very small scale, and not only from the top of the chain, but at the stage that things are now. I think EPC companies that are already capable of showing their clients, look, we have this solution, and we can help you saving here or there. Now there's a commercial advantage for those companies as well. So I think both from higher level utilities and both from supply chain, I think the path is ahead of us, and we all can take a step further for it.
Yeah, I think thanks, Pedro. I think that's really interesting insight, actually, from that sort of EPC perspective, because I see an opportunity for the EPCs being that sort of integrator organization. You know, and if you know, we were talking around that sort of network, and actually how, you know, if you're an Uber, for example, you've developed that network of organizations that can help you build your platform without necessarily being an expert in how each of those partners delivered or developed their component parts. Well, almost the EPC organization can operate in that way. I think that probably the biggest opportunity there is, I think, you know, for you know, if you look at this kind of area of IoT, digital twin, whatever you want to call it, in the bigger context, I think a challenge for an asset owner, a water company, is actually, what does good look like? You know, I've got lots of different suppliers knocking on my door, trying to sell me a sensor or a platform or a dashboard for XYZ, or what they call a digital twin, but actually I don't necessarily know whether it's a digital twin or not. Actually, for an EPC, that's an ideal opportunity there to, you know, to collaborate with the asset owner and say, look, actually, you know, here are our sort of group of supply chain partners that will deliver, you know, a specific value, a specific outcome, but the EPC is the organisation helping to bring that together.
Just to add something there,
yeah.
I think I know this is hard to put in place, but I think the concept of value has to go further than only the financial value. Yeah. And I think customer engagement, and especially from an utility point of view, is gonna be a big factor on valuing a solution. Yeah. So, or what the company has to offer. So I know this is hard to put on paper what we will gain. Yeah, we'll get customers will be happy, but
yeah,
there needs to be a way needs to be found there just to materialize how customer engagement can be valued.
Yeah, and I think a key thing is how you actually articulate value. You know, what does value mean? And I think, you know, going back to what I mentioned around sort of commercial procurement culture that we have in the water industry, you know, it's very used to, you know, procuring assets, you know, whether that's technology, whether that's concrete, whether that's labor, whatever that may be. And that's quite easy to put a financial number against. But, you know, when you talk about digital twin, actually, how do you, you know, in terms of on paper, like you said, Pedro, how do you, you know, how do you really quantify and articulate that value is something that's quite difficult. And I think, you know, the other interesting point where I think the EPC comes in is you mentioned kind of profitability and value from delivering a particular project. But the other is around risk, and where does risk sit in that supply chain? You know, and you know, I spent a number of years in sort of capital sales, capital business development, where it was very much risk passes down the sort of commercial supply chain. Okay, so a lot of risk sits with the EPC in terms of integrating on a classic sort of design and build project, integrating suppliers together and technology together, and the overall risk sits with the EPC. But the EPC will naturally want to pass down some commercial risk to the component supply chain. So if I'm supplying a particular asset, then typically you will have performance guarantees around that. Now, in the digital environment, sometimes when your supply chain can be made up of some reasonably large organizations like mine, for example, but also some very small organizations, some SMEs, some startups. Each of those organizations has a very different attitude to risk, you know, and that's not actually to say that the smaller organizations won't accept the risk and the bigger ones will. Actually, it's often the other way around. But I think for an EPC, that's quite an interesting position to be in terms of actually, you know, it's about value, but it's also around risk. And if you look at some really advanced commercial models, a lot of that is around equal, or not equal, but appropriate sharing of risk. And I don't necessarily see that yet in our industry. And I think that will come, but it's going to take some time. You know, and I think, Andrea, it goes back to some of the points you were making at the start in terms of where those budgets sit, but also kind of who's kind of next on the line if this doesn't work, you know, where does that risk sit? And I think that, for me, if you go back to that sort of periodic table, no matter how good our kind of system is, our digital twin, our asset, whatever it may be, is, if we can't get that kind of value and risk profile right, you'll always come up against blockers, because nobody will want to take that kind of first step. No matter how big or small we start, it still requires, I would say, some kind of pretty disruptive people within all organisations, whether that be water companies, EPCs, the technology provider, to say, do you know what, we're going to give this a go. And I think that's a really interesting sort of
So Wlliam, we are in an experimentation phase. I mean, we don't see many digital twins working in the water business yet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually what is required, the most. We need more of these digital twins working. So, from my perspective, as you framed this here, I was trying to bring all of these things together, and you started with the example of Uber, which is a platform business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually very good because it has the same environment that I see for digital twins, because, the elements of this business are there.
Yeah.
What the digital twin is doing, and we just saw the architecture where we have developed since Miami last year, is actually we put all these proven elements together on one platform. And then you pick, you don't need all of them. For example, we were discussing, do we need physics-based models and data-based models, both, right? And both have strengths and weaknesses. So the architecture shows both, but, a digital twin would work with one of them, right? And, you spoke about collaboration. I mean, that's very important. That's actually risk sharing.
Yeah.
One of the prerequisites that will come out of this workshop here is start with BIM. Building information modeling is a methodology to share risks, actually, right? Because different stakeholders and project partners are working together in real time on the same project. They share information. And that's why I think the principles of BIM is as open as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So start there. And I mean, that's something for collaboration and integration. And, the main key for me as a consultant is, what is the customer asking for? And at the end, this is what he's paying for. So the digital twin concept with this architecture allows so many aspects to deliver value for him, because you can pick and you can customize as he or she wishes. And that's a key element of digital twins, as I see it also in the automotive or in heavy mechanical industry 4.0 applications. The interoperability of this digital twin, that is a key thing, because you don't start from scratch, especially in water. You don't.
No.
Right? There are utilities, they have invested in the past, and now I'm talking about budget, because you have to respect that no utility can just throw away and leapfrog from water 1.0 to 4.0. You have to respect what is there, and then fit your model into this, your model of a digital twin. And that's why it's important to talk from the beginning about the target of the customer, the return of investment. And I think the digital twin concept offers so many touch points. I mean, it can be transparency, it can be training, it can be cost reduction, the operations here. It can be integrating sensors and IoT, because we have so many sensors and so many data. We have to make value out of them. So that can be a value for a utility, or it can be automation at the end of the day, right? So I think this is a huge chance for the water industry, and we are lagging behind. We are lagging 10, 15 years behind of other industries. Now we need exactly this: experimentation, co-creation. We need some, early adopters. We have some, but I think much too less of them in number. And then we have to, use this one to share what was the value, what did we receive out of a digital twin operating for a year, and was that more on this side or on that side? And I think that's actually a big challenge, but also, of course, a huge opportunity for us who are, all investing and interested in this technology.
No, I think that's really interesting, Richard. And I think it's like when you're making a snowman. You need to get the ball rolling. Once you get the ball rolling, then it starts to gather pace, and it starts to build, and it starts to gather some energy.
Wlliam, who was talking about digital twins 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Only a few, right? And then after, every year you see the big fairs and exhibitions, more and more it's talking about water 4.0 and digital twins. At least I'm actually, I don't care, how much maturity is behind this. At least there's a sensitivity that we have to embrace on digital technologies. And that's positive. So take the positive out of this. And I think we should, now that we have this architecture, that's definition enough. Let's go out with all of these chances that this technology and this approach offers, and ask our customers, where's your pain point actually?
Yeah. And I agree. I think the world is changing. The mood music is changing, so to speak. And I think certainly in my experience, we're having more interesting discussions now, I would say, on the commercial aspects, not just the technology aspects. Whereas, if you were to go back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and that isn't that long ago, really, you would have a discussion around digital twin or real-time optimization, whatever it may be, very much on a technical level. It would never kind of progress to the commercial level because it would kind of get stuck at the technical level, and you'd have a great discussion. But actually, then how do you move it forward? And I see that starting to change. I'm mindful of time, everybody. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to bring Scott or Prabhu into the discussion. Anything to add, gents? Maybe not. You're both on mute, just in case you're speaking in the background. No problem. Interrupt me if you want to. Yeah, I agree, Richard. I think collaboration is absolutely key, and you're right. That is a form of risk sharing. And I've certainly challenged internally within our own organisation, actually, of look, organisations that we might have viewed as competitors in the past are actually now partners and collaborators. So,
exactly.
Let's open the doors. Let's stop being overly concerned around risk and IP and telling somebody too much. Let's have an open discussion, and there's room enough for everybody. And let's understand where there are opportunities to collaborate. And I think that's a little bit of a challenge back to the supply chain, to say, actually, if I was an asset owner here and part of my organization is an operator of assets, actually, as a supply chain, don't necessarily rely on me as the asset owner to understand where each of you need to fit together like a jigsaw. Because historically, I might have done that because it would have been about a process engineering solution or a design and build solution. Actually, supply chain, you need to fit yourselves together and come to me with a solution. And I think that's a different sort of commercial approach that we'll have to.
And a little bit covering this openness, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the platforms that we are developing now is open source, right? So, we expect that we can't model everything. I mean, there are so many applications out there that we offer a library for everyone to expand and develop their own applications on that. And I mean, this is something that I fully support, this idea of openness to somewhere started and to collaborate. And of course, at the end, I mean, it is that the owner operator is, of course, also the owner of the system at the end, right? But the different parts of this are elements that are working today. You need a platform, and you need someone who integrates that, of course, right? And then runs the digital twin. But I mean, as you said, there is so much room for collaboration, and the potential is so high that we should now, really put more efforts into use cases and get experience out of them, which can be shared, publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I pick up on the points that were raised earlier by Ryan and others in terms of, let's not try and fix the world in one foul swoop. We need to break it down and actually deliver value where we can actually demonstrate value. And I think that's really key. And a key thing is about being open, sharing data. In my opinion, exactly what you're saying, Richard. You know, so actually there isn't this sort of division between asset owners and supply chain. It's actually one ecosystem that we're working together to deliver an outcome. So look, we've got about a minute and a half left. Has anybody else got any sort of points to raise or throw in at the end, or should we consider kind of wrapping up?
I've got one. I've been struggling with the fact that there's so many platforms now, right? Everyone has their own platform, and that there's some inherent risk in that to me. You know, I like that everyone's working on digital solutions and twins, and you know, we can have different types of models or algorithms that run on it. And maybe what I'm seeing is Power BI is sort of a unifying type platform that we may be able to kind of collaborate on. But I wonder if that will be a struggle as we try to collaborate on different platforms.
Yeah,
I think selling their own, you know.
I think you're right, Ryan. I think it absolutely is. One of the dangers we've got is actually, you know, the digitalization is the intention is to simplify things and make things more transparent and open. One of the dangers is we'll have a dashboard for everything on our assets, and actually we just end up with more confusion. You know, as an industry, I don't think we suffer with a lack of data. What we suffer with is an ability to interrogate that data and deliver some value from it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying there, Ryan, is, you know, the danger is we end up with more of the same. And actually, how do we really articulate the value out of that? So, hey, with 5 seconds to go, maybe that's a good point to leave it. Thanks for the discussion, guys. Really interesting.
Thank you, everyone.
Webinar link, and that would be the same link as you utilized before to earlier today to join the event. And if you can't find that link,